I think with that, I will welcome Elizabeth Gulugulu, who will speak on the youth position paper on strengthening the African youth voice in climate discourse. Elizabeth is an environmental scientist. She's a climate activist from Zimbabwe, nominated as top 100 youth in conservation by Africa Wildlife Foundation in 2020, and nominated as top 20 women in sustainability. Elizabeth, please, over to you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. Thank you so much for the invitation. I will just be turning on my camera just now. Yeah, I think I have questions before I start my presentation. Just help me understand here. Someone sent the invitation to me, and in the invitation, it stated that you already had a local conference of youth. Is that right? Okay, so
100%.
Yes.
It's coming up on the 23rd and 24th of October.
You will be having, or you already had one?
Oh, no, we will be having in a couple of weeks.
Okay. So this event is to engage young people in the development of the position paper.
Yes.
Great. It's good to have that information clarified. Thank you so much. I just want to say congratulations to you all for organizing such a beautiful event. People might say Zoom meetings are not inclusive, but it's better to do something than not to do anything at all. So you can start with a Zoom meeting, and those that are part of the Zoom meeting, you all have a responsibility to share what you have had in this meeting, and to ensure that other young people, they also get the opportunity to contribute into the position paper as well. I believe you all represent different constituencies, different organizations, and you're from different provinces or districts. So this is actually an opportunity for you to spread the information that has been shared here. I will not introduce myself. That has already been done. I'm from Zimbabwe, yes. And also I once served as the global focal point for the official children and youth constituency to the ENFCCC, which is Yungo, in 2022. And I think in 2022, the momentum for LCOYs was already, was already on the peak, moving from 5 local conferences a year to 74 local conferences of youth in that particular year. I think it was quite impressive. And the kind of partners that got on board to help us so that we could have an LCOY in different countries. And it's good to be speaking with you all today. It's my second time speaking on a platform in Botswana, and I just want to say thank you. So I'm going to share my presentation. If you know me, my presentations, I do not like them to be so boring, but I love being realistic and straight to the point. If you want generic information, you can go on ChatGPT to get generic information, but I normally love speaking from experience and the reality that is on the ground. What does a position paper mean to you and to me? Why are you here in this meeting? How do we get to develop a position paper, and how can we be strategic as young people within the space? I'll be giving you examples on, different activities and initiatives that I think young people were not strategic or might not have used their platforms well for learning purposes. And I hope it will be beneficial to you all. So just a minute as I try to. Okay, here we are. I've been tasked to discuss or to engage with you on the topic African Youth Voices in the Climate Change Discourse and the position paper, how it can be strategic. I'm sure you are seeing familiar faces on this picture, quite active, energetic young people in Africa that are championing climate change, not only at a regional level, but also at a global level. Shout out to them. So first and foremost, I think we need to understand why our voices matter. Why should we be concerned as citizens of Botswana? Why should we be concerned as African citizens? Number one, Africa has the largest population of young people globally. This is why we should be concerned, because we are quite a lot. And usually when we are quite a lot with few resources, then there is a scramble. So this is why we should be concerned. Number two, we should be concerned because we are on the front lines of climate impacts, and this makes our voices so critical. Raise your hand if you have not had water challenges. Just raise your hand if you think you have not been affected by water challenges. Just raise your hand. Okay, raise your hand if you have not been affected by power cuts. Raise your hand if you have not been affected by droughts. Okay, the fact that I'm not seeing any hands coming up, it simply means that we are on the front lines of climate impacts. It might not be you, but it could be your friend, it could be your families that are on the front lines, and it also makes you vulnerable, because if your family is in danger, then you also are expected to act so that you can get to save them. It once happened. I do not want to get into that story now. Maybe later when we meet, I will share that story with you, when my sister got trapped in a flood and I was 400 kilometers away from her. The only person she could contact was me, and the only message I got was help, and that was it. I couldn't get hold of her for 3 good days. So these things are real, these things are happening to us. We don't get to listen on radio or to see on TV. Is the reality that we are quite experiencing. Then the reason why our voices matter is whenever there are problems, there are always opportunities. And I do believe that Africa has so much potentials, and our voices do matter, and our voices should be heard. So this is why I think our voices are important in this conversation. Now we need to understand, as African young people, what have we done? What is our milestone? Where are we now? Of course, there's been a huge momentum. Last week, Zimbabwe was just having its local conference of youth. Then 2 weeks back, Zambia was having the regional conference of youth. Then 2 months back, Morocco was also having the regional conference of youth. And what is happening? We talk about the Africa Climate Summit last year, which took place in Kenya, the Africa Climate Week in Kenya, where young people traveled all the way to engage with policymakers, decision makers, and like-minded people. So African young people are quite engaged, especially at a regional level. They are quite engaged. Of course, there could be issues on how resources are being distributed. You get to find out that other countries have resources for young people, yet other countries do not have resources for young people. Therefore, when we meet at regional platforms, there is lack of representation, especially from other countries with who are struggling a bit with supporting young people's initiatives. So just to give you a context, then there is youth-driven advocacy everywhere. You see Greta started a good campaign, striking for the climate. And we have seen people like Vanessa Nakate from Uganda. We have seen people like Elizabeth Watuti. We have seen people like Nesrine. I do not want to mention most names because I believe we have so many climate activists doing what they can with the resources that they have. And also, young people have contributed into national documents and policies. We're talking about the national adaptation plans. Different climate policies in Zimbabwe is actually consulting on their climate change bill. I believe South Africa already adopted its climate change, already now has a climate change act, but please correct me if I'm wrong. I know Kenya already has a climate change act. Then the NDCs, which will be renewed after each and every 5 years, starting from 2015, when we had the intended nationally determined contributions. In 2020 and 2021, the second cycle of the NDCs was submitted. And now next year, the third cycle of the NDCs will be submitted. And this is when we have the big COP in Brazil. Young people have been part and parcel of this. Young people have been participating at COPs. I've seen various pavilions. I've seen the Zambian pavilion. I've seen the South African pavilion, the Zimbabwean pavilion, the Namibian pavilion, and young people that are taking action and doing events, engaging their governments, other stakeholders. And also, I do not want to talk about challenges because that will be on my next slide. This is how young people have managed to engage. So young people are doing a lot, in as much as it might not be documented, in as much as it might not be known or seen, but I believe young people are doing a lot with limited resources. Now, what are the challenges that young people from Africa are facing? I was not even supposed to put all this information because I would love to believe that this information is obvious. So long you're in Africa, you're experiencing the challenges of being a young person who is in the climate change space. Number one, I briefly touched on this lack of resources. So if I'm looking at resources, I'm not looking at traveling resources to conferences, etc. But how can young people from Botswana access resources that can help them to implement different climate change initiatives? It could be climate change campaigns like tree planting campaigns, installation of solar panels, waste management practices. How can you get access to those funds as young people who are trying to also support the government in implementing such? So that is also where finance comes in. Then we look at how are young people from Botswana capacitated? Are they knowledgeable enough? Are they educated enough? Do they know what climate change is beyond activism? Can they articulate issues to do with climate change with policy makers and still get their voices heard, speaking their language? So we are not only talking about climate injustices now, we want climate finance. We're talking about the language that is being spoken within the negotiation rooms when people are negotiating on just transition. For example, just transition will be a topic of interest, especially in Botswana, because we're looking at how best we can compensate people who have been working in the mining industry. How best can we stop mining coal and try to transition to renewable energies? What is going to happen to these communities? So many jobs are going to be lost. Do we have a plan? How are we going to compensate them? How are we going to make sure that young people, women are not affected in the long run, since the men are believed to be the breadwinners in our African context, the ones that are going underground, mining these precious minerals. If we opt for a just transition, if the men do not have work anymore because of the just transition, because of the transition that should happen, it means several livelihoods will be affected. And how do we get to engage? How do we make sure that it's just not leaving anyone behind? So such conversations, when we engage with policymakers, how can we put our points across? How can they hear us? How can they say, oh, these are just activists. When we talk about loss and damage, when you talk about indices, it's not a matter of, oh, include young people in their indices. We need to be factual. What are we looking at? We're looking at forest. What is the state of forest in Botswana? What kind of hectares do we lose each and every year? What kind of hectares should be rehabilitated each and every year? What kind of opportunities that are there? Are we talking about opportunities when it comes to Article 6, carbon credits through implementation of carbon sinks? That kind of information, how are we going to articulate that information within the existing climate change policies? Number two, the challenges we face. We have lack of representation, which is here. You will see at any conference or any engagements. Oh, okay, let's start from a national level. We have the Ministry of Youth. I don't know how active your Ministry of Youth is, so please forgive me. We have the Ministry of Youth, but we also do have the cabinet. We have ministers. How many ministers do we have under the age of 35? Let's start from there. And if we have ministers, okay, maybe the bar is too high. Let's look at the parliamentarians. In terms of parliament, how many young people in parliament that are below the ages of 35? That is really important, because if we have young people in parliament below the ages of 35, definitely they will always champion for young people's concerns and needs. So that is important. There is lack of representation everywhere, especially in the African context. When we look at the cabinet, when you look at ministerial positions, when you look at parliament positions, even the councils that you see, the boards that are currently available, your Environmental Management Protection Agency, I don't know what you call it in your country, they do have a board. The Forest Commission, it does have a board. I'm not so sure if you do have a Climate Change Commission. These kind of boards, you need to be strategic as young people. Look at these boards. Do we have young people? And it's not a matter of just saying we want young people. We want young people that are experts in that particular field. So when we say we want young people to represent us, you yourselves, you know who is capable of doing that job well. You know who is an expert in that area. Advocate for those people. When you're saying young people should be represented, we are not talking about you as an individual, right? Because the moment you start looking at yourself as an individual, then we might lose focus. We might lose focus. So we are looking at those that are capable to do that particular initiative. If you're capable, then good for you. But sometimes you get to see people that are saying, oh, I could have been part of that board. Okay, let's see your qualifications. What do you have? Did you study environmental science? Did you study forest management? Did you study, and you want to be part of the Forest Commission board, you don't even have the qualifications. Please give us a break. We need to be strategic and make sure we have our young people there. Number three, the challenges we are facing. There is lack of jobs everywhere. Currently, I'm in the UK. There are also lack of jobs in the UK. But the most interesting and fascinating thing about the UK is, yeah, you might not find the job that you went to school for, but there is always a job. There is always a job that you might not have studied for. So you might not find the job in environmental science, but if you decide to go the health way, there are always jobs, there are always vacancies, they are always in need of healthcare workers, they are always in need of nurses, they are always in need of doctors, they are always in need of pathologists, they are always in need, you can name it, right? They are always in need of auditors. What you studied for, you might not get that opportunity to actually work, but also here the economy is quite good. If you cannot get the opportunity, it's easy for you to get a scholarship and continue with your studies and do your masters, your PhDs. It's easy for young folks that grew up in this area. But now going back to the African context, if you do not have a job, you do not have a job. It is what it is. If you don't know anyone in your government, if you don't know anyone who is a policy maker, a decision maker, a politician, I'm sorry, it will be difficult for you. This is the reality on the ground. It's a matter of who do you know. If there is an interview, people will just call people for an interview, but already they have someone they have in mind because they have received a call from upstairs. This is how it is. We cannot change this situation. We can only change it if we advocate for young people to be part of these boards that I talked about. This is the only way we can change the situation. This is the only way we can unlock opportunities for us young people within our sector. This is the only way we can have the Botswana that we want it to be, because we have unlocked opportunities for young people in different sectors. Now, I do not want to be too politic about this, but I heard someone saying, voting. It's important that you go and vote. No matter what party you vote, it's up to you, but it's important that your voice is heard. You know what's good for you as an individual. You know what's good for you as a young person. Go and vote and make sure the change that you want, you're taking a role and you're taking part in it. Whatever political party you vote for, that's your business. We don't care, but you need to make sure that your voices are heard. Then when we come here, you'll see that our voices are not being heard. And it all goes back to representation. This is the challenge we're having in most African countries. Young people are not represented anywhere. If young people are not represented anywhere, it means our voices can never and will not be heard. So I believe I'm talking to a mature audience here. The whole purpose of this presentation is for you to know that you have an important role to play within the climate change discourse, and your voice is important. I've already given you ways of making sure your voices should be heard, especially within the political spaces. Be part of strategic movements, be part of councils. When people are calling out for boards, apply. Don't look at, but I'm still young. Apply. If you think you have an opportunity to be a parliamentarian, run. We don't care which political party you represent, run, because we know when you're part of people making decisions, you will champion for young people no matter which political party they do represent. So please keep that in mind. Now, how do we amplify our impact? We have talked about the challenges. There's so many ways that we can amplify our impact in a more strategic manner as young people. Number one, we look at our relationship with our government. How do we relate with the government? I will be honest with you, it's not easy to create a relationship with the government. It also depends with the country you are from. But our governments are quite political, you know, and it's not easy. They love engaging with people from a certain political party. This is normal, right? But you can be strategic. And what I've seen young people making a mistake is they think they know better than the government. Well, when you're talking about creating relationships, it's a 50-50 thing. You need to benefit, the government need to benefit. Go and strategize as a young people. What are the government's strengths? What are the government weaknesses? What are my strengths as an individual or as our organization? What are our weaknesses? If we are now going to approach the government, what should be our entry point? I will just give you an example of how we did it in Zimbabwe when we started engaging with our government. There were young people that have been in the space, and definitely when the government wanted anything to be done, they would go to those young people. But that group of young people, they what do you call it? They were gatekeeping. They never shared opportunities with any young people. Remember the climate change issue, it started to be talked about in 2013, 2014. And by that time it was 2015, and we're fairly new in this space, and these people were gatekeeping. The government, they didn't know me. I went to school, I studied a BSc in environmental science. Then there are young people that I worked with, but the government knew them, though they were not even educated or, I will not say much, but yeah, they were not educated, but the government loved working with them because they've been in the space for some time. And I would ask myself, I would get frustrated when those young people are nominated to speak somewhere. And I'm like, come on, why are you inviting these people? What have they done? What do they know? Because that time I wasn't thinking outside the box. But those young people were strategic because they managed to capture the government's ears in as much as they were not qualified to do so. And yet I was qualified to do so. I could not capture the government's ears. And I would always cry foul. And I'm like, why are they inviting these people? What do they know? So I had to go back to the drawing board. And I was like, okay, I'm going to work with these young people. These young people are going to introduce me to the government. So I started working with these young people. I started, doing the best that I could, supporting them. Before you know it, there was a meeting. These young people, they recommended me to go to that meeting. I went to the meeting, I networked, I shared my contacts, and I told people this is what I do, and I'm working with these young people. Slowly, the government started to recognize my presence. Slowly, the government realized, this person is actually qualified. Slowly, the government invited me to more meetings, more trainings. I got capacitated by the government. I got educated. The government started giving me accreditation to participate at COPs, though I had to look for my own funding, but it meant a lot. So since 2015, we've been engaging with our Zimbabwean government. And as you can see here, this guy used to be our Minister of Environment for Zimbabwe. He's now the Minister of Economic Minister of Industry and Commerce. But this is how it started. You need to create a relationship with the government. You don't know it all. The government doesn't know it all. Your efforts need to complement each other. Sometimes you have to be humble. In as much as you know it all, if the government says, you don't know, say, yes, we don't know. And this is why we are here to learn from you. Give them that respect. They always want that level of respect. By giving them the level of respect, it doesn't mean you're dumb. It doesn't mean you're stupid. But this is a strategy. Your strategy as your organization, a strategy as an individual. You need to be strategic. And one of the mistakes that I've seen young people doing is they love reaching out to UN agencies, UNICEF, UNDP, UNFPA, etc., especially when they want to travel. That is a wrong approach altogether. And please, if you're planning to do that, stop. Stop doing that. Stop reaching out to UN agencies because you want to travel and yet you have not established a relationship with them. This is what clever people will do at the beginning of the year. Come up with your work plan as young people and say, this is what we want to achieve this year. Share your work plan with the government. Share your work plan with UNICEF. Share your work plan with the NDP. Share your work plan with the NFPA. Your work plan should state who is responsible, who should be responsible for each and every task that you would have listed. If you think UNICEF should be responsible for the LCOY, it should stay that way. Request for a meeting as early as February, March. Request for a meeting with these organizations so that you can go through your work plan and you can find synergies. This is what strategic people do. Already they now know you, right? And tell them that you're available to support any initiatives that they're doing. And you could, also do the same, invite them to some of the events that you're organizing. This is how you start creating relationships. Honestly, if you're to ask me for $5,000 right now, do you think I'll give you even if I have it? I will not give you because I don't know you. So I just cannot give you. You need to establish a relationship. Relationships are reciprocal. No matter what you tell me, but if you have a friend, there is something that you're benefiting from that friend. And there is something that your friend is benefiting from you. This is how relationships work, right? If you are friends with someone, that someone, you're benefiting something from that someone. You might not be willing to say it, but you are definitely benefiting something. So make sure you establish these important relationship with different stakeholders. They do help you. whenever you reach out to them, they can be very helpful. And you can amplify your voices through capacity building. Here we were capacitating young people from rural communities. Here we're using art to communicate climate change because we're working with children. And here we were planting trees with young people so that they understand that they need to give back to Mother Nature. Going on my last slide. Now the position paper and call for action. I've already said this. Your strategy. Number one, create relationships. Relationships do work for you. When coming up with a position paper, do not be generic. Look at the gaps. Look at the challenges. What are you currently facing? What kind of change do you want to see? So when crafting a position paper, it's not only about saying the government is not doing this, the government is not doing blah, 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 the government should do this. What are you doing as a young person? Yeah, the government is not doing this, but as a young person, what are you doing? As an organization, what are you doing? Because we have reached to an extent where we need to be accountable of our actions. So it's not a matter of, oh, the NGOs are not doing this. You have to be specific. Your position paper shouldn't be more than 2 pages because no one will read it. If you have plans of submitting it to the government or to higher offices, no one will read it if it's more than 2 pages. Make sure it's short and straight to the point. If you want access to climate finance, what exactly does this climate finance look for? Are you going to ask the government to establish a budget specifically for young people in the climate change? Look at different budgets. There's the environmental budget. From that budget, do you think there could be a portion that could be channeled to young people to implement their initiatives? You need to be strategic. Do not advocate for things that are already being implemented in your particular country. Maybe your country is already implementing climate change education somewhere, right? Get your facts right. Do not say we call for climate education because Zimbabwe is calling for climate education in their position paper. Get your facts right before you put it on the position paper. Like I said, the whole point is to make sure these people get to hear us and they need to know we are speaking from an informed point of view and we're capable to speak their language. Acknowledge where good work has been done. If your government have done something in climate and environment, you start by acknowledging. We acknowledge the government of Botswana for establishing the dash. We would like to acknowledge the government of Botswana for supporting young people to participate at COP23, COP24 by offering badges. We would like to acknowledge. This is how you get people listen to what you're saying because you're appreciating the good work that they have done. And then you go on to say, however, we feel like we call upon dash. We would like to emphasize on dash. We recall on, you reference to other policies that you think there are gaps missing when it comes to youth involvement and youth participation. Now, I will not say much. I have so much to say, but I will not say much. I believe the little that I've shared with you will go a long way. Never take local actions as if they are not important. They are quite critical. I started from a local, I reached to a global level, and this is me with the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, but it's because I started local. So this is just to motivate someone to say, your voice is important and it matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was amazing. Especially how practical it was. I think just starting in the chat, looking at some of the comments. Waganse says learning a lot. Thanks for sharing the lifelong tips. And then Sepang also interesting presentation. Tanaya agreeing there with appreciating the some of the tips that you shared. And I think my main takeaway from that was the idea of needing to collaborate and have a strategy. I think we all agree that when it comes to the climate crisis, we all need to have a hand on, but also appreciating collaboration. And as young people, yet sometimes we're frustrated. We walk in there and we don't prioritize collaboration so much. I mean, in going forward, thank you for the practical tips. You talked to gatekeeping as well as the reason for coming in there. And for you, with the journey that you've had, starting from Zimbabwe to the position to being one of the co-coordinators of Yango, to now the global platform where you are engaging with the UN. You shared a lot of tips, but what is the one thing that from this, from your presentation, from this call, if someone could only remember one thing and they would take it and keep with them to help facilitate their journey as on taking climate action, but also on engaging different actors and on contributing to the national position paper. I know you've said a lot, but if there was one thing that you'd say, hold this and keep it, what would that be?
I would say be humble. Be humble and show respect where it's due. That's what I would say. It goes a long way. It goes a long way. Yeah.
Be humble and show respect where it's due. Elizabeth, thank you so much. Your journey has been nothing less than inspiring and motivating, especially when we feel our voices sometimes don't count. And thank you for making time to join us all the way from, I think it's the UK. Thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of your day. We will be in touch. We'll continue to share some of the tips that you shared. And there we go. If anyone would like to stay in touch with Elizabeth, and I'm sure all of you would, she has generously shared her LinkedIn the link to her LinkedIn in the chat. And again, I'm going to share that link to the position paper that we're putting together. She's made it very clear why it's so important to have your voice in there and what you need to put in there. Please feel free to contribute there.